Welcome to Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. I'm your host, Mark Long. Today, I'm bringing you that piping hot political tea, along with a few news updates, and then of course we're going to get into a little bit of viewers' choice topics, and then hopping into the best of 2025. What do you still need to get into before the year is over? Grab your tea, grab that coffee, and grab that water, because you know you need to be replenished to get into this tea. Take a seat. Okay, Donald Trump is saying that the economy is doing quite well, and that if it's not doing well, it's not his fault. Let's take a listen.
They want to just have a level playing field.
The president is blaming his predecessor for challenges facing farmers, but many have been squeezed by Trump's trade war, with foreign markets for their products restricted and prices for equipment rising. Consumers have also been concerned about prices, especially for groceries, which have gotten increasingly expensive in recent years. Nearly a year into President Trump's term, the price of eggs, a key Trump campaign point, has gone down, but the cost of other items like beef and orange juice is up. In a recent NBC News poll, 66% of Americans believe the administration has fallen short of expectations on inflation and the cost of living.
Now, isn't this outstanding that Donald Trump is basically trying to say that Americans are full of shit right now, that, things are basically okay, which is quite ironic given that also the White House released a statement on inflation. And their statement pretty much puts a lot of blame on the Biden administration, and there's no talk about there's a little talk about what the administration is planning to do, but it looks like a lot of blame on Biden. I'm just going to give you some clips or some tidbits of what it says. It says, on inflation, President Trump tamed Biden's inflation crisis and is working to bring it down further. Under Biden, so Biden's name's everywhere. Under Biden, inflation averaged nearly 5% and hit 9.1% amid the worst inflation crisis in decades. Okay, we knew that inflation was a thing. Next, what they're saying, in President Trump's second term, inflation has dropped to an average of just 2.7%. The critical first step in reversing Democrats' cost of living disaster. In fact, under President Trump, Americans have even seen the first overall price decline since 2020. I don't know what planet this administration lives on, but this is clearly not true. And this is on the White House's website. You can't make this up. And now Fox News is going around saying that Trump's $12 billion farmer bailout package could mean great things for grocery prices, but what they fail to understand is that there's a lot that comes into this affordability conversation than just a package for farmers or just fixing agriculture and wanting things to happen nationally, which is fine. You want things to be made in your country, but you have to make sure that people have the means to do that. Along with the affordability, it's not about just making sure farmers have something to do. It's making sure that everyone in the country can afford to live. Grocery prices are still high. This article that I was reading talks about how the prices of groceries, especially around the holidays, saw no significant change in price. We see that egg prices have come down, but with everything outside of that, bread, bacon, red meat, even orange juice, these prices have skyrocketed at least by, it's looking like over 10% for some of these things. And imagine a family who can't even find work, because right now it's hard for a lot of Gen Z people to find work. The job market's not that great. Unemployment rates are absolutely awful. And we know that based on what has been reported, the current unemployment rate in this country, get into this tea, remains low. And the stock market actually indicated this as being one of the highest rates of unemployment seen in a very long time. So we need to take a beat. This administration is gaslighting us, and we do not need to fall into anything that they're saying when it comes to affordability. I personally have not seen any price changes. I was walking around in, I believe it was Walmart the day after Thanksgiving with my sister-in-law and my husband, and the prices in freaking Walmart were ridiculous. So if the prices in Walmart are ridiculous, imagine how the prices are at your local grocery store or while you're traveling and that kind of thing. So let's just take a beat. I know this was a lot of information and it's, not as positive as what we want it to be, But let's hope that there will be some changes happening and more check and balances as we move into 2026 so that we can stop this corrupt administration from lying to the American public and making things up that are simply not true about the cost of living. Okay, moving on. Today, on December 11, 2025, the Senate voted on two competing healthcare bills, one Democratic and one Republican. Both failed to reach a 60-vote threshold, which was needed to break the filibuster. The voting counts include the following. So, each proposal failed by 51 to 48. Yep, largely along party lines. The Democratic proposal was basically pushed to extend the enhanced ACE subsidies, originally expanded during COVID, for 3 years. You all remember that? So during COVID, it was impacted, but Democrats are pushing for it for another 3 years. And the Republican proposal, was to replace subsidies with health savings accounts, offering up to $1,500 annually for qualifying Americans. This result, neither plan advance, right? And which basically leaves subsidies set to expire at the end of 2025, which means premiums are expected to skyrocket for millions of Americans. So what impact does that mean? Without subsidies, premiums for the Affordable Care Act Marketplace plan could double or triple for 22 million Americans who currently benefit from that. Now, with this timing, these increases would begin in January 2026, hitting households immediately after the holiday season. And what we also know, with Medicaid expansions, funding remains contested with the uncertainty for states to even consider some expansion coverage under the Affordable Care Act. Right now, we know that low-income families are going to be impacted by this. We also just talked about how ridiculous prices are. But giving this most ridiculous information, this is going to definitely be something that is going to have a huge impact on millions of Americans across the country. Some political intention and strategies from the Republicans was basically to shift these subsidies into direct savings to appeal to basically fiscal conservatives who want to basically save and spend versus having the government regulate or whatever their plan is. And then they also want to position themselves as offering it as a choice and basically just rejecting this idea that the government should provide and fund these subsidies for Americans. And on the other side, Democrats just want to preserve the subsidies that already exist, which makes it affordable for millions of Americans who, without this healthcare and without the access to this, would die. So, it's life or death for a lot of people is kind of what Democrats and what people with a moral compass are looking at. So they're framing it a little bit differently than the Republicans, and both parties want the Affordable Care Act to basically be changed. And right now we know that nothing's happening in the White House and from this current administration, which makes it a little bit tricky and scary for a lot of people going into next year's. Broader implications of this, with things expiring, we know that those who are low income are going to be impacted, meaning that there's going to be a lot of people who are going to choose to go without health care. And we also know that if the marketplace drops millions of Americans because they can't afford their premiums, there's going to be a lot at stake. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be striking. There's going to be a lot of issues with messaging and campaigns. Democrats will be able to push the agenda of affordability a little bit more and also talk about reform in a way where Republicans have not been consistent in making that happen. So moving forward, there's a lot to consider here. I'm personally confused as to why nothing is happening. This administration that has all this control in the White House, who are sitting there basically happy and joyful with their millions of dollars and being able to afford grocery prices and everything that's and what have you, because they have it, because their privileged asses sit over there with the ability to not have to worry about healthcare, while there are families that are actually struggling, that because of the Affordable Care Act, we're able to keep food on the table, but not only keep food on the table, make sure medication was affordable. Make sure their parents who had cancer or their loved ones or spouses or kids that had chronic illnesses were able to afford and get the right treatment with the right affordability and with the right access. So this is going to impact a lot of people. And again, so we just have to look at this as hopefully that there's going to be some changes happening in 2026. But now the messaging is clear. Affordability and healthcare. That is the most important thing right now, and every American shouldn't be having any adverse impacts from this whatsoever, like what's happening right now with this current administration. Moving on to another crazy topic. So I told you I was going to keep you all in the loop about everything that's happening with ICE and what's happening with refugees in the country. We talked about the Somali immigrants and mentioned that update a few podcast sessions ago. So let's get into this. So the overall arrests reported by ICE right now, if we take a look back at 2024 and compare it to right now, we see that, one, the arrests have rose significantly, right, by 18% over a year between 2023 and 2024. But most importantly, right now, we're seeing a lot of shifts. So under this current administration, which was basically some policies were revised, ICE is focusing more on the individuals versus not necessarily the criminal convictions, because we see what the data is showing us is that there's been actually a 70% increase of individuals being arrested who do not have a criminal background. And this matters because there has been a lot of conversation being put out there that all of this information is not true, and what are the Democrats talking about, and what are these blue states talking about. All the information is very clear. We see from some information online that ICE agents under Trump have actually arrested, and I can give you some actual real data right now. They have actually arrested at least, new data shows that nearly 75,000 people arrested by ICE between January and October had no criminal record. There's also more information that shows that Donald Trump claims that federal immigration agents are working to rid the United States of dangerous criminals, when in fact we know that that's not the case. He's actually trying to rid the country of people that are here undocumented because they are brown or black or whatever, from countries where Trump does not approve. He's been very vocal about how he feels about Haitian refugees. He's been very vocal about how he feels about Somalian refugees. But mind you, these people are here legally and went through a legal process, through a program. They're trying to undo every program, every kind of initiative, every kind of loophole, for whatever reason and for whatever purpose, to just completely deport anyone in this country that, one, doesn't speak English, two, that's here undocumented in their eyes, because they're also going after people who they consider to be here illegally. For example, the whole idea of racial profiling, this administration says, is claiming that it does not exist, specifically when it comes to immigration, because what they're saying is that this immigration is actually focused on making sure that killers, leeches, and entitlement junkies are deported. And this quote comes directly from the Department of the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. You know how we feel about her. She's not the best person to speak on issues. I also want to touch on this too, because ICE has been notably in the past focused on making sure the country is secure when it comes to the border. Now there has been a huge shift to focus on communities of color and communities in countries or in metropolitan communities in blue states and large cities, because Trump feels that these people did not support him in his last run for president. So, which is interesting, because a lot of people who are undocumented cannot vote, even if you come here through a process, because you have to meet qualifications as an American citizen to vote in this country, meaning you also don't get certain subsidies that Donald Trump claims that Americans have been getting. So yeah, this is just another example of the president being racist, and another example of this administration being tone deaf of the reality of this country, and that people who are here illegally want to be here legally because they love this country and they're able to work and provide for their families. And a lot of these people, if they're being deported, they're not going to have that support when they go back home. So yeah, just wanted to clock that and give you more information on where we are with this. All right, I want to talk about another topic here. So the U.S. has actually seized a large oil tanker called the Skipper off the coast of Venezuela on December 10th of 2025. President Trump confirmed the operation, calling it the largest tanker seized ever. And he is saying the U.S. would likely keep the oil. Now, also Venezuela denounced the move as pretty much piracy and as blatant theft, while oil prices rose in response. So let's get a little bit more information here. The tanker had been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury since 2022 for alleged involvement in an oil trafficking network tied to Iran's Revolutionary Guard and Hezbollah. Now, more information on that. The operation involved the U.S. Coast Guards, FBI, Homeland Security, and Marine Corps, along with helicopter teams and basically securing the vessel. There were no casualties reported, but this seizure is a part of Trump's pressure campaign against Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, who the U.S. has accused of basically narco-terrorism and corruption. And they're also saying that Venezuela relies heavily on oil exports, most of which go to China. But in this case, cutting off shipments is seen as weakness to the government there. And oil markets pretty much have reacted to this, saying that there is basically going to be a huge response from the Venezuelan government, which is basically accusing the U.S. of trying to steal natural resources. So let's get into a little bit more tea. I wonder what my girls in our view have to say.
We're now realizing oil is part of it, but this move specifically on this tanker might be a good thing. And I say that because my first reaction when Trump's involved and a lot of the people he puts in office, you're like, what the hell are they doing? There's no faith in the system. There's no transparency, especially after all these boats were attacked. But this is supposedly, and I actually kind of deep dove into this topic about sanctioned oil. And it is diverting oil that could be going to China, Russia,
and Iran.
And Iran, who are not, they're adversarial nations to us. This is something the European Union has sanctions with them. Canada has sanctions. The U.S. has sanctions. They came in with a warrant on this ship. There was actually a warrant to go after this ship because what they're trying to do. Well, no, but that you got to call them when they're
a federal judge
do it. When you look, when we criticize all the time about the illegal things, you got to call them. This was a legal seizure of an oil tanker, and a lot of what they're saying is that this is also going to de-incentivize black market ships from stopping in Venezuela and taking this oil to enemy nations. So this actually might be a good thing, sadly wrapped in a Trump packaging, which makes it really hard to see that.
So if they took the oil to enemy nations, what does that mean?
Well, it was supplying some terrorist regimes for years now.
And they're sanctioned by the U.S. government. It is unlawful. I would say I see this
But so you just blow up all the ships
It's
that
not
are
blowing
doing
up.
it?
This is not
They didn't even resist, by the way.
Can I just say this, though, on the legal piece of it? Yeah. It's unclear whether or not this was legal. A federal judge did issue this seizure warrant that you're referring to roughly about 2 weeks ago because of the ships, this particular ship's past activity smuggling Iranian oil. And that oil is typically used to finance terrorist activity. So I understand that piece. But the piece that I don't understand is that the president of the United States is almost acting as if he is a pirate. And the United States is, we're just a group of pirates. Because some legal experts will tell you that the U.S. has no jurisdiction to enforce unilateral sanctions on non-U.S. persons outside of its territory.
So that's interesting. Sonny's point is interesting there at the end about this whole piracy claim from Venezuela, but also her with her legal background. She's saying that this can be perceived that way because of how this is being operated, obviously with the jurisdiction approach and just the plain just disrespect of is in our territory and there's been a warrant. Sarah gave some very good explanation on that. Let's talk a little bit more information. So Attorney General Pam Bondi released a 45-second video on X basically talking about how they executed a seizure warrant on the vessel. So she made that very clear, which is quite interesting. And then what's actually happening to the vessel and now what's going to happen with the oil. So the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt spoke to reporters today and basically saying that it's currently undergoing a forfeiture process right now. So the United States currently has a full investigation team on the ground, she says, and on the vessel, and the individuals on board the vessel are being interviewed and any relevant evidence is being seized. So she also goes on to say that the United States does intend to seize the oil, as Trump said. However, she says there is legal processes for the seizure of that oil and the legal processes will be followed. So clearly you can take this for how you want to take it. My personal feelings on this, I feel like if the skipper was sanctioned by the U.S. Department in 2022 for its alleged role in something, sure, whatever. But I don't think we need to be in this place, as Sunny mentioned, of getting to this place of wanting to take things because they belong to us or blah, 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 blah. When we clearly know that this is going to impact on Venezuela's economy, and obviously we know their president is very, very controversial. He's obviously involved in a lot of different crimes or corruption things that have existed for numerous of years. But the two countries that are major petroleum producers with some of the world's largest oil reserves are definitely include Venezuela, but also a Nigeria-based management company called Tomaros Global Ventures is owned by a firm linked to Artemov, according to a publicly available. So there's other options for oil, basically, and I just think this just comes to be like really weird for the president to do, and it's completely just a distraction from what the president wants us to look. It's look at me, I just seized oil, now our prices are going to come down, or now we have a surplus, and these idiots that we don't like are going to have to suffer. And I just don't think that's a cute way to lead the country. Thanks for listening to me clock that political tea and also spill some news. Let's get into another topic. Hey everybody, welcome to another topic, and we are going to talk about artificial intelligence. Yes, so this is a topic that some people who listen to my podcast thought that I should cover, and I was more than happy to dive right in because there's a lot to talk about regarding artificial intelligence, and there's a lot on the horizon. It's like the new wave, right? So let's talk about the Time Person of the Year for a second. So the Time Person of the Year this year, actually in 2025, was actually the architects of AI. So that's quite interesting too. So time-honored architects of AI as Person of the Year, spotlighting leaders like Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Elon Musk of, obviously, you know what he's of, Lisa Su, and Sam Altman of OpenAI. Now, this recognition reflects AI's inescapable influence in 2025, from education to healthcare to just the workplace, and fears of mass disruption while you're getting your work done and not have any convenience to get the answer. Now you do. So this is only the third time Time has honored a non-human force, like a one person, following the personal computer, I believe, in 1982, and Endangered Earth in 1988. So this is quite interesting as we hop into this topic. So I want to talk about some perks and downsides of AI. So I'm a professor. I always use Copilot and AI. I feel like it's good because I'm someone who I care about grammar because I think grammar is important in order to get your message across, but I'm not like the grammar police or anything like that. So I think AI for me has helped in that purpose of just kind of sharpening my messages and making sure my punctuation's together and that kind of thing. I think sometimes you just have to be mindful of what you put into AI. So you can't just have AI do it all for you. You have to put the information that you want AI to organize. It also helps me prep for my podcast. I use AI to help organize my notes and to help confine some topics and some talking points as well. You have to be careful because sometimes it doesn't give you the right information. So sometimes you might want to ask AI to pull out the references and the data and that kind of thing. But anyway, so some efficiency with AI is that it automates the repetitive tasks for you and it streamlines your workflow. So it allows you to kind of organize yourself in a way where things are a bit more accessible. It also provides instant tutoring. It gives medical advice, some organizational tools. It also generates art. Can you believe that? Music. There's been a new mainstream artist, which we'll get into in a minute, and new scientific insights. So it helps reorganize and capture data that has already been out there or that is currently existing. And it helps scale that information and bring it in a way so that you can pull new factual information where you can regulate new studies. It also helps business with scaling information and also helps businesses analyze massive data sets really quickly, which is a really, really, really good upside to AI. Now, some downsides to AI. obviously there's privacy risks. So AI surveillances and these new apps and these new sources have to be very mindful of misuse, which raises concerns with civil liberties to some people. Some people think that if you're relying on AI too much, this can become an ethics issue. And with it being an ethics issue, it can also create biases in regards to having systems that can reinforce discrimination if trained to do that. And if it's biased and data is being plugged into it so that it can make those assumptions and those opinions based on what is being fed. So it's also some more downsides to look at is job displacement. So with millions of Americans currently working in fields where AI is being implemented, a lot of people have some fear that some of them their jobs might become a little bit, less needed, and that millions of roles will be automated now, especially in like routine sectors, right? So that's something that a lot of people are concerned about. Also, there's a lot of concerns of over-reliance and people having a huge set of dependence on AI and people, weakening people's skills and human skills in their judgment and not giving us the ability to make decisions on our own. So that's what a lot of people are saying. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it, right? So if you want to look back at the 2000s, there was a introduction to the media or to mainstream pop culture with the movie I, Robot, which often fueled a lot of myths regarding AI. So AI, some misconceptions that kind of came up as themes that continued after that movie was released was that AI thinks like humans. In reality, AI just processes information and it lacks that consciousness that humans do. So in the movie, we saw these robots that were AI controlled, right? And there is this kind of pull and tug of if they were humans or not. So that component was very consistent in leaving that part in there. But AI doesn't necessarily operate as a human being. It's just it's supposed to be used as a tool or a resource. So going into more information on that, a lot of people say that AI learns on its own. Nope. AI doesn't learn on its own. AI is completely human engineered and is completely trained by humans. And humans have to train and update the system. So it has to be regulated, obviously. But also we are responsible for the information we feed into it, as I said before. Using it as a professor, obviously to organize things. But also being mindful that AI isn't necessarily here to replace humans to get work done for students. So, making sure that you're having conversations with your department regularly and being responsible about what information is coming out in your field or in the discourse and where you've worked or where you do work. I think that's super important to take note on as well. So another misconception, AI doesn't need humans. That's absolutely not true. AI depends on human oversight, right? And we also know that AI makes mistakes and it does have biases. Errors are very common. So there might be time where you read information, you might have to do a double check. So like typically, like I mentioned before, AI is used as a tool. You can ask it to pull information and sometimes they'll just make shit up based off what you put in there. So you have to be very careful that, AI is currently able to be used as a way to help us get through life more easier and not necessarily used as a way to replace our skills and our functioning every day. So I think I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. So Bill Gates predicted this, right? So we all know that he predicted that AI is revolutionary and that it was going to be compared to your personal computer, your mobile phones, the internet. He predicted that within 10 years, AI will replace many roles in medicine. I know we talked about this a little bit, but that's really significant because if you look at how medicine is set up right now, it relies a lot on the shifts and changes in technology and how information is gathered. So a lot of doctors are using AI now to take notes on their patients. So you'll see them with their smartphone devices that they use for work, and it records conversation and it with obviously consent from those who plan to receive services from these public institutions, but it records information and it helps generate the information for the doctor so that they can get their notes more accurate, and also it kind of highlights information and relevant information so that they can keep track of data that they can pull later on for when pulling reports or when making other medical decisions. So this is it works in a great way in the essence of healthcare and making sure that people and doctors are giving you accurate information and keeping proper notes without missing information and that kind of thing. Obviously, we're going to see this in the human service field as it's starting to shift a little bit more virtual as well. So human services meaning mental health care, counseling, psychiatry, psychology, that kind of thing. It'll just be interesting to see where AI goes. Now, I know when that movie first came out in the early 2000s, I thought that AI was going to be like this huge new wave of how our life is carried out every day. But I'm starting to notice with every technological update, it just happens gradually. You know, if you look back at I believe it was the 60s and 70s when the show The Jetsons came out. I don't remember exactly when, but it was a while ago. And basically, they were kind of showing how they thought life was going to be like in the 2000s, right? There's going to be flying cars. There's going to be Rosie, your robot, helping out with your dishes. And there's going to be new waves of transportation along with new styles of working. They got some things right. So I remember the Jetsons getting right the virtual video calls and that kind of thing. So all that stuff kind of stayed on. But now it's a little bit more permanent as a part of our everyday life. I also think it's super important to look at other aspects of artificial intelligence and how we shouldn't be too fearful of it. I think AI, like I mentioned before, is used as a tool, but most importantly, is set up as a way to help us shift in a way where our lives can be made more convenient, but also that we can have information at our leisure so that we can become better human beings in terms of accessing information. The only issue I have with artificial intelligence is misconceptions and misinformation and data that is basically biased and derived from those who are putting misinformation into it. I think we have to be super mindful with how we use it. When it comes to young people who are using it in education, I think parents just get used to it. AI is going to be a huge part of their life. And one way that you can prepare them for being responsible with AI is just reminding them that it's a tool, but also you as a parent becoming adjusted to AI as well. I think if you're using it every day in your life, you can use it to help set up your plans for shopping, your plans for travel if you are planning to travel. You can use it to organize your grocery list. You can talk about different recipes. So there's a lot of different ways where you can use it where it can be just a part of your norm and not necessarily something that you should shy away from. So I'm loving AI. I think it's going to be here to stay. I think 2026 is going to bring a lot of new ways for AI. And I think Bill Gates is right. I think in 10 years, we're not going to see a lot of, changes in terms of more people being hired to work in medical settings. But I think we're going to see a little bit more assistance from artificial intelligence. Thanks for listening. All right, I'm here to bring you a fun topic. This topic is going to be talking about girl groups and where are they now. So I want to talk a lot about the divas, right? Because, the icons of the 90s, of course. But most importantly, girl groups kind of stayed around and they had a resurgence probably, I believe it was in the 2010s, I would say. Because we had groups like, I believe it was Fifth Harmony and Little Mix. So we'll talk about a little bit of that. But let's get into it. So the Spice Girls, right? So the Spice Girls had this rumor about this 30th anniversary world tour in 2025 to 2026 or something. And reports suggested that Victoria Beckham, Posh Spice, is unlikely to participate in that. But Mel B and Mel C and Jerry and the other girls and Gemma are all pushing ahead to do it. So I want to give you a little bit more Spice Girl tea. I wonder what's going on with the girls, right? Because there's been so much happening in regards to just making sure that girl power still exists, but also just what are they up to? Mel B, Scary Spice. So she's been active on TV for quite some time. So she's been in the entertainment business as a judge. She was on X Factor in the US and the UK, I believe. I think she came in as a guest on the US when that one existed. But she's been here doing a lot of other things like America's Got Talent. She was also in some other shows here and there, streaming. So Mel B has stayed busy. So Scary Spice is doing her thing. I know she's also been remarried. I believe she got married to Eddie Murphy and they had a kid at one point. Mel B is living her best life. She also went through like a scary relationship situation. We don't have to get too much into that because we don't want to give that person air who caused harm to our precious Mel. But I'm happy that she's still thriving and doing her thing. Mel C, Sporty Spice, continues her solo music career, and she's very popular overseas, I would say. And she's always releasing new material and touring independently and doing her own thing, as reported by US Weekly. Jerry is doing her thing as well. Ginger Spice, she hinted that basically that there would be some kind of tour. She's the one who kind of spilled the tea on that. But she does a little bit more with philanthropy, and she kind of stays in her own lane with writing and doing that. Baby Spice Emma is a radio host, and she remains a media personality while balancing family life and occasional performances with the girlies, and she's living her best life as well. And last but not least, Victoria Beckham, other known as Lady Beckham, right? Posh Spice. Right now, she's focused on her fashion empire, and she's unlikely to join the rumored tour, but she was recently, I believe that she is now Lady Beckham. So let's get some more tea on that, but I can spill that. Multiple outlets are reporting that the Spice Girls are planning that tour, so I can give you some updates as we go on. Yeah, she is considered Lady Beckham. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about a few other notable girl groups, right? So some girls groups to mention would be Blackpink, New Jeans, IVE, and a few other ones. Blackpink is a really popular group and is still one of the biggest names in K-pop with global tours and brand dominance all over the world. So that's very, very cool. All right, I want to continue talking about some more of these girlies. So Fifth Harmony, after a 7-year hiatus, came back together, I believe, in Dallas at the Jonas Brothers concert in August. So Allie and Normani, Lauren and Dinah, I believe they've all released solo music. I don't think Allie's music did that great. I think Dinah had a song that charted in like 2018. Lauren was recently on Dancing with the Stars. And of course, Camila Cabello did great as a solo artist. And she did not join the girlies when they decided to come back. She did leave the group earlier on than the rest of them. But there has been more rumors out there about the ladies getting back together. We know Normani has also been on Dance with the Stars. I believe Allie was also on Dance with the Stars. Now we just need Camila to be on Dance with the Stars. Maybe she's too famous to be on there. And then I believe the last person, Dinah, could give it a go. Why not? Dinah was one of my favorite singers from the group, and she's doing her own thing. The ladies have been slowly hinting at wanting to get back together, so maybe we'll be surprised in 2026 and see them come out with more stuff. TLC, my favorite group of all time, was a famous 90s group, as you all can recall. T-Boz and Chili continue performing and doing their thing. There was a biopic that was released, I believe, in like 2013 or 2014. To start Keke Palmer, Drew Sidora, and Lil Mama. And they all played the girls, and it was so good. And that actually really got me into TLC, and I would listen to them nonstop. My family grew up listening to TLC, but I really got into the girlies later than everyone else. But anyway, while Lisa Left Eye Lopez tragically passed away in 2002, the duo still honors her till this day. If you've been to any of their shows, I've been to one of their shows. It was great. I believe they were touring with En Vogue or another famous group. But it was just so special. It's so great that they still have the superpower that they had in the 90s. But TLC just remains active in the life circuit of entertainment. And they are nostalgic. They are people that we trust to give us amazing R&B soundtracks, obviously, but they're just someone that's just imprinted in our aura of a group that has made a huge way for other girl groups to come. Speaking of other girl groups to come, Destiny's Child, right? So recently, Beyonce brought the girlies out in her Cowboy Carter tour. So that was Michelle and Kelly. Kelly is continuing to do her own thing. She's releasing music. She released music, I believe it was right as COVID was starting or before. Yeah, right as COVID was starting, she released some awesome tracks. Coffee was a good song. And she's continuing to do her thing as well. I know she's got into her judging bag the same way that Mel B got into hers, but Mel B is continuing. I think Kelly has kind of pulled back. Michelle has released music, obviously a gospel album years ago. So while no permanent reunion has been announced, this link up between the girls obviously reignited nostalgia and speculation. as it did when Fifth Harmony had their reunited thing happen in August at the Jonas Brothers concert. I just think it's funny how like girl groups come back together and that kind of thing. That's a good sign that there is some healthy ness in like wanting to step away and do your own thing. But these ladies are thriving. Obviously, Beyonce is doing her thing. She's Queen Bee. So it's kind of interesting if you look at it and compare it to the Supremes. Beyonce is the Diana Ross of that group, and she just completely just became a megastar. So Destiny's Child will be another one of my favorites forever. Last but not least, another group I want to talk about is Little Mix. So after their hiatus in 2022, Jade, Perry, and Leanne pursued solo careers. And we know that, firstly, I believe it was one of our girlies who initially left, Jade. She announced her departure, and she released a solo album in 2025, earlier this year, called That's Showbiz Baby, and it did okay. It did okay over in the UK and that kind of thing. So, you know, there's been speculation about them getting back together. But I think the cool part about being in a group, I guess, I haven't, obviously I'm not in a girl group, but I can, based off from what I'm seeing, is that there's opportunity to make great music and then to have it exist for a long period of time and to give people that memory of the fabulousness of tracks that we still sing along to till this day. I'm a huge proponent of groups getting back together if they want to, but I don't feel like there needs to be extra added pressure. Like, they existed when they existed, and let us have our moments. I think another great group, just a couple great groups to mention, obviously, would be the Supremes, Bewitched from the 90s, All That You Are, that song, you know. There's tons of girl groups I can go on a rant about, which actually gives me some pause. Let's do that. I know we did some honorable mentions before, but let's go ahead and just talk about a few. So, the Supremes, obviously, Motown legends. We talked about En Vogue, you mentioned them a little bit, but just wanted to mention them. SWV, Sisters with Voices from the 90s, who I love their song Weak, right? Escape, love these groups. Escape was actually one of the groups that really, really did it for a lot of people. They were kind of like really, really early on in the game in the 90s in terms of that mainstream R&B 90s girl group hip flow that wasn't very like too feminine. It was kind of like it was kind of like grungy, but also very, very specific to that Atlanta Southern R&B feel. So that's awesome. Danity Kane, you know, from MTV's Making the Band. We won't go into too much details because you know there's Diddy drama with that. The Pussycat Dolls, 3LW, Three Little Women. Y'all remember them? And obviously the Pussycat Dolls, Nicole Scherzinger did her thing and became known. 702, remember those girls? Where my girls at? And then the Ronettes, the 60s icons. Remember Be My Baby? The Shirls, the Crystals, the Marvelettes, the Pointer Sisters. Remember the Bangles? Walk Like an Egyptian. The Go-Go's. First all-female band to top Billboard charts. And then, not to mention, the Cheetah Girls from the Disney Channel, the phenomenon of the 2000s. And then the Andrews Sisters. It was like the Andrews Sisters, I remember hearing about them. They're like a World War II era harmony trio. Look them up. They were kind of like the beginning of like the first ever girl groups to actually like be known, especially across the army and other foreign countries. Now, some international girl groups to mention, just some notable ones, would be Bewitched. Obviously, the song C'est La Vie. You remember that song? They're from Ireland. Yeah, so that's cool. The Sugar Babes from the UK, known for lineup changes and UK charting. They're actually very well known over there. So is a group called Girls Aloud there, and then obviously a few other that we talked about earlier. But yeah, these are some great groups. I'm happy that a lot of them have done well and that girl groups have reclaimed their power and that they are very influential on the music industry and that they have made ways for the gays, baby. They have reintroduced us to a new wave of what it looks like to support someone in business, right? Obviously, they're women supporting women from in front or from what we see in the camera, but we know there's drama behind the scenes. So I think it's super important to mention that a lot of these groups went through a lot of struggle with greedy people, but it shows the resiliency with the fact that I am 34 years old and I can literally rat off the lyric to any one of these ladies, okay? So there's that. Thank you so much for listening. I'll bring you more next time. Okay, last but not least, this last segment is going to be very, very cool. It's going to be the must-sees of 2025, or basically just things to get into, because the year is pretty much almost to an end, and you can't end a year without diving into what the year had to offer, right? We talked a lot about politics at the beginning, but now let's talk about, just some things you could do. So I saw pretty much most of these movies, but some must-sees movies of 2025 as it lists out would be Sinners and Wicked for Good, which I can say both those movies were absolutely outstanding. Another great movie that has been getting a lot of buzz this year was One Battle After Another. I believe you can stream it, but a lot of people want to go see it in theaters. 28 Years Later is a long-awaited sequel to 28 Days Later. So yeah, and Zootopia 2 for the little ones is a Disney animated sequel and a family favorite. The first one had a great cute message, and the second one does the same thing. So you all should go to the movies. I love going to the movies, and I think the ability to stream and download and buy a movie on Amazon or whatever, or Prime, and just watch it with your family, you can do it that way too. Get some popcorn going. Some much-watched series of 2025 include, obviously, Stranger Things Season 5, which just premiered, right? Or just went live for us to go see it, I guess, on Netflix. So check it out. I'm still only one episode in. Another show people are saying that has been getting a lot of buzz has been The Pitt on HBO Max and Severance on Apple TV. A show that recently got out there was It, Welcome to Derry. I talked a little bit about that in my previous podcast. It's pretty intense, but it's definitely worth the check out if you like scary things. If you don't, maybe don't check it out. And then The Chair Company, which is a satirical workplace comedy. I haven't heard much about it, but I am excited to check it out, as I'm hearing that is something cool to consider. Some trends of 2025. AI is everywhere. So we talked a little bit about that on the podcast today. Check out that segment. You're going to enjoy. Climate technology has been changing substantially. So we're seeing a lot happening with sustainable energy and disaster responses. Given the change in weather between this year and last year, and just kind of the natural disasters that have happened, there's been a lot being pushed into this. So the trend here is that there's more focus on the climate and the environment, which is practically the opposite of what the Trump administration wants to hear. So we'll just keep that between all of us. Obviously, space tourism has picked up a lot of traction across not just the United States, but all over the world. Some shopping has been integrated into a lot of our social platforms, a little bit more than you've noticed. So, for example, a lot of these companies had stores already, but now it's like a huge marketplace, especially on places like TikTok, for you to sell and be an influencer and get your brand out there, or start a business, or become someone who's mainstream, who talks about things. You can do it all online now, and that's been a new trend of this year. So youth culture, especially from Gen Z influence, has been reshaped, especially with politics, branding, and workplace norms. So a lot of trends this year have been shaped by a lot of online culture and a lot of what the youth are bringing to the mainstream, which is going to be interesting because that's where the money was going to be flowing now. So in 2026, just expect more of that to, basically be a priority for the social norms in this country. Some social media trends. So YouTube and Facebook still dominate overall use, but TikTok is basically the everything app with shopping, as we just mentioned. So it's like the main app right now compared to apps like X and apps like Facebook in previous years that are still being used. TikTok is pretty much taking over. A lot of people are finding themselves needing a social media break. So a lot of people are deciding to not go on social media because people are starting to see that is the new wave of support in terms of getting your name out there. But it's also the new wave of finding alternatives to stay engaged. For example, we have Threads and Blue Sky, which are alternatives to X, which has been seen to be moving a little bit more in a direction of conservative and free-for-all and freedom of speech and that kind of thing. So X is a little bit mushy. So a lot of people aren't really engaged there, or a lot of people are choosing not to be engaged there, although it still remains as a primary source of information finding for a lot of people. AI generated memes, it boosted by 60% in social media. So that's really, really important to mention, because now we're starting to see that AI is taking over in that way of things too, with generated information into short form videos, cementing itself as like a prime time form of relaxation or a form of mindfulness, just scrolling through the web. Some new lingo. Okay, so the kids. So glazing. Apparently, this is a phrase of overly praising someone, embarrassingly. So when you're glazing someone, you're giving someone too many compliments. You're glazing them, I guess. Bussin'. Obviously, I heard this way too much. It just means really good. So like, especially food. Oh gosh, these terms are so weird. I remember being like, now I feel like an old whippersnapper. Like, or instead of a young whippersnapper, I feel old, and now I feel like I need to call them whippersnappers. No cap. So that's one that basically has been kind of around for some years now. But no cap basically just means, you're being honest and you're not lying. Or you can say that you're all cap, meaning like you're definitely someone who's put on facade or you're lying. Slay has been around for some time. I don't know why it had a new resurgence this year in 2025, but apparently slay has come back in full force this year, meaning owning confidence and style. Slay has been used amongst the LGBTQ plus community forever, but it started among a lot of people within the fashion industry, especially among black women. So we want to give some onus to that. But gays are the ones who kind of made it a huge part of our art form in a way where you're showing off a good look or a good feature. And bet. They love saying bet. The kids love saying bet, and they love saying things like 6, 7. I don't know what any of those mean, but I know bet means to agree or excitement and that kind of thing. Some new sites and places to visit. So Paris is still number 1 for a lot of people. Tokyo is starting to become very popular, with its tech and culture hub being a huge reason. A lot of people are flocking to Japan just to see some new features and to get immersed in their culture, how they're a little bit more improved in a lot of places, especially in the metropolitan areas. The Swiss Alps for some outdoor adventures, if you're into that. Obviously Cancun and Florida if you're into traveling to those kind of places this time of the year or just in general. I'm personally not going to Florida right now until they get their shit together. New Zealand, for some reason, is rising in ecotourism destination, but not as a place that people want to move to. So that's quite interesting to hear about that trend. Some of the biggest news this year. So obviously Donald Trump inauguration as the 47th president in January. We had a lot happening with the first Pope from Chicago becoming the Pope and being this historic person that wasn't the norm of someone who they would pick. So interesting there. The longest U.S. government shutdown in history. That happened this year. We talked a little about that on the pod too. Climate disaster, so a lot happening with floods, cyclones, and we had a lot happening with the heat waves this year. And this isn't abnormal for a winter. We're finally having a normal winter season, so it's been interesting to see all that kind of come into fruition this year. And as I mentioned earlier, AI named Time Person of the Year, basically the architects of AI. You can check out a little bit more of that. And then peace deals, so in more conflict. So we have Ukraine and the Middle East and a lot happening over there. But we've been a little bit more involved in that than the president said we would be. So it's been interesting to see how that unfolded. And as we are wrapping up 2025, I would advise you all to make more memories. The year's not over. And who knows what's going to happen between now and the end of December. Anything could happen with the current administration, but also anything can happen in our lives. With all the improvements in technology, you never know where things are going to go. Thanks for listening to Clock the Tea with Dr. Long. Please tune in for our next episode, which comes out next week. I'm going to start releasing 2 episodes a week, so please tune in. Next week, we'll start back talking about some reality TV. So, you didn't get it this episode, but don't worry, that tea is hot and piping, boiling, and we'll be ready. Take care.